Welcome back. Next, let's make our new box form. So this form here, which should now add to the existing state of the parent that is going to render it. So we'll make the new file and we'll call it new boxform.js, add our component skeleton here, and then instead of returning a div, we don't really need that, let's just return a form, and eventually we'll add our onSubmit. And I'm going to fill out the form. So I'm going to add for each group of a label and a form, or an input together. A label and an input, I'm going to wrap them in a div. So we're going to have a label first. We have height and width. So let's do height. And then after that, we have our input, type equals text. And before we go any further, let's make sure that this is showing up. So inside of our box list, we'll import new box form from /new box form. And then after the boxes inside this div, we'll render a new box form. And are we seeing a form over here? Yes, it's ugly, but it's working. And actually, I think it's better if we move it above the boxes so that we can just see it here. Okay, so back to the form. We have a lot of things to take care of. Remember that we need to have internal state in this component that manages the individual inputs. So I'm going to do that now. Add my constructor, super props, and then set this.state to equal the three things that we need in there starting out empty. So we need height is an empty string, width is an empty string, and then color will also be empty. Okay, so now our input, we can start the process of controlling it with React. So we're going to give it a name of, this one is height, so we'll do height. And then we also give it a value, and this is this.state.height. And then we'll also give it an ID of height so that our label can have the HTML4 attribute, which is looking to match with an ID. So it should also be height. So this is going to give us a single input. We're setting the value to be this.state.height. And then the most important part is adding in that onChange. So onChange is going to be this.handleChange, which doesn't exist yet. So this is the same as all of our other handle changes we've seen. It takes an event, and then we're going to just call this.setState. We take advantage of the computed properties now. So event.target, whatever the name is, set that to be event.target.value. Make sure we do target with a T. Okay, so anytime there's a change, we look for the name, which is height, and we're going to set state of height to the new value in this form. And what I always like to do is, well, first, before we even check if it works, we have to remember to bind. So this.handleChange equals this.handleChange.bind this. I always forget to bind. Come over here. Let's open up the developer tools for React. We can ignore that warning about the key. We will be fixing that soon. And inside the box form, we should see height change as I start typing, and we do. All right, so that's working. Now let's duplicate this 2 times. In the first one, we're going to edit them. Instead of saying height, we'll edit everything to say width. And now if we just double check, we should be getting width updating in this state as well. And then finally we have color. So I'll select all of these instances of height and change it to color, and capitalize this one just for display purposes. Okay, so remember, we have to have everything match. So whatever we're calling it in the state, if it's color, we need to make sure that down here, the name is color and the value is this.state.color. Technically, the ID in the HTML4 can be called whatever we want. And one more time, make sure that color is working. So new box form, we type into color, purple, and we're getting purple over here. Okay, so now we need to make sure that we can create something when this form is submitted. So at the bottom, after that last div, let's add a button. This button will just say add new box. And we'll use an onSubmit instead of an onClick, although we could just do an onClick here, but we'll do an onSubmit event equals this dot, and we'll just call it handleSubmit. We could also call it gather input. HandleSubmit is fine. And we'll start by binding it. This dot handleSubmit equals this dot handleSubmit.bind this. There we go. And then we'll define handleSubmit. So handleSubmit is going to need to take the data from our form that's currently in the form state and pass it up to our box list and call some method in here that will take that data and add it into state, calling setState. So up in our box list, let's make a method called create that takes a new box, and then we'll call this .setState, and we're going to set boxes to be the existing boxes plus the new box. And while we're here, we need to make sure to bind this .create equals this .create .bind this, and then we're going to pass create down as a prop to the form. So we can give it whatever name we want. I'm going to go with create box to describe what it does, and it's this .create. So we're passing it down, this .create. Again, we could have done this with an arrow function and not done any of this over here where we create a handle submit and have to bind it and pass the state through over here, but I like to avoid arrow functions when possible inside of our render. Okay, so I'm going to pass down create box as this .create, and then over here inside of the handle submit, I can call this .props .create box. And what will I pass in? I'll pass in the entire state. Because our state only contains height, width, and color, that's exactly what we want to pass in to create a new box. We need height, width, and color. So I'll pass it in, but if I leave it as it is right now, we'll have a problem because our form is going to refresh the page, so we need to prevent default on submit. Now is the moment of truth. We'll see if we have any issues. Let's make a new box that is pink, add it in, there it is. So the button still doesn't work, but we're successfully creating new ones, although we're not clearing the input, so that's simple to do. Inside the form, we're just going to call this .setState, and the new state is going to have height. We can just copy what we have up here. All of these reset to an empty string. So now if I create a new one, a 2x5 that is teal, add new box, the form is emptied, and our new box shows up down here. Awesome. So that's all we need to do to make the form. We're done with the form component. I know it's a lot of work just to make a single form, but remember the flow here. I'll review it. If you don't care to watch me review it, just go to the next video. But what we do is in our box list, we are rendering the new box form, and we're passing down a method that affects the state, create, under the prop create box. So then inside of the new box form, when this form is submitted, handle submit is called, and we are going to call create box from the parent. We're passing this .state from the form state up to the parent that is managing all the boxes state, and then we're resetting the form state to be empty so we have a clean slate on the form. So this pattern is really, really common. The most annoying thing is just having to remember to bind. We've got to bind handle change and handle submit, and then in our box list we have to bind create to this component here that's managing the actual boxes. All right, in the next video, we'll finish up by getting the remove button to work.